So let's have a bit of a tough chat. So content warning for this video is that we're going to be talking about trauma, writing trauma. So if that content is going to be sensitive for you, maybe skip out on this video. I'm not going to be going into any details or anything, but just so you're aware, I have been writing a tough section of my book, and I think it's taken me a couple of weeks to process and really get why I've been struggling so much. In a lot of my writing vlogs, I've been talking about how writing has just been difficult the last couple of weeks. Not really the actual writing itself, but there was something not quite there. Words weren't coming as easily because the situation was a lot more complex. In one of my vlogs, I had even mentioned that I don't think that there are going to be any more tough sequences to write, like emotionally, in Seventh Virtue, and I was wrong. There were more. But yesterday, my sister was listening to these chapters that I've been writing for the last month and a half in Seventh Virtue. Listening to the whole sequence gave me a much better understanding of why I was struggling so much this entire time to write. Basically, I was writing an emotionally traumatic section of my book, and it was tough on my narrator. So I've been writing a book called Seventh Virtue for the last year and a half, 2 years almost. It's contemporary fantasy. It's really, really long. It's almost 200,000 words. It's ridiculous. It is a spin-off of a series that I have been writing for a really long time. I will link the video where I explain the history of the project, but all you need to know in this video is that one of the characters who narrates Seventh Virtue, her name is Reeve, was a narrator for the previous books in this series that used to be a different age category, a different genre, a whole bunch of different plots, but the characters have stuck through to a new project. So the character is Reeve, and I have been writing Reeve for so long. I came up with her character a couple of days after I turned 13. I am 21 now, so she has been in my life for a really, really long time. I was writing a section of the book where she had to basically confront something traumatic that happened, a traumatic relationship. And I knew this was going to be difficult. I just didn't think it was going to be as difficult as it was, because it ended up being particularly difficult on me, which was a bit of a surprise. I've had this sort of in the works for many years, so I've been aware of sort of like her emotional reactions to things. I know Reeve very well. I know her limits. I also empathize with her very much. I was talking about her in one of my vlogs, and I mentioned that she's kind of like a sister to me. Like, I understand her very well. I know who she is as a person. And what's funny is I didn't always. At one point, I kind of forgot how to write with her. When I started shifting the books out of her point of view, I stopped writing with her for years. And I didn't know who she was. She became a bit of a caricature of herself, which funnily, that caricature is how she survives sort of difficult situations. But that was really all I knew her to be. But now that I've been writing with her for a long time in Seventh Virtue, I really got to see who she was again. And it's like time didn't even pass. We just picked up where we left, and I know her very well. I had asked a question in my last writing vlog, like, do you ever find it's tough? I think I've asked this question a couple times on my channel. Do you ever find that it's tough to do like bad things to your characters, basically? And I know a lot of people struggle with that, and I never used to. But I think something has changed in me, like the older that I get and the more I understand the severity of the things that I'm doing, that I find it really hard emotionally to do that to people that I love, right? And they're just characters. They're not real, but they feel so real, and I empathize with them so much. They are like, they feel like friends to me. They're people that I have seen grow up just as much as myself. You know, Reeve started as a 15-year-old in book one of Fostered, and in Seventh Virtue, she's almost 24. So let's talk about writing trauma, how that is for me. And I have a couple of points, so excuse me if I'm looking over to the right. But one of the first things that I wanted to talk about is how difficult it can be, especially when you have your own issues. I have been in this really bizarre headspace since I started writing these chapters. And something about writing is some writers are able to like really separate themselves from the work. They like don't emotionally invest in the same way. And it doesn't mean that they don't care in the same way. It just means that they don't need to. For me, I didn't realize, I guess I am like a really like emotional person when it comes to writing. I put my heart into the empathy of these characters, and sometimes that can be difficult because you're just a human being absorbing the emotions of other people or the scenario that the people are in. And so in this section of Seventh Virtue in particular, Reeve is in what I've been referring to as, a fairy tale from hell. It's a fake sort of paradise that she's in. And she's aware that it's not paradise, and she is aware that she is not in a good situation. But the way that it's presented is, so like you are now back in fairy tale land, welcome, enjoy your stay. And that has been tough. I didn't realize that it was affecting me, and it took me a long time to actually figure it out. Because if I approach writing to the point where I have to be like emotionally invested in it to kind of write it properly, I have now put myself in a position where we're both in it together, right? She's in fairy tale from hell, I'm in fairy tale from hell. So, and because writing is such an isolating experience, what ended up happening is I found that I was there alone. And obviously she's there, we're there together, but I'm the one writing it, right? I'm the one feeling those emotions in order to write her having them. And to live like that for like a month, like an extended period of time, was tougher than I realized. And it was because it actually made me realize some things about my own relationships, or a past relationship in particular. Unbeknownst to myself, I didn't think this was going to happen. I've written difficult things in the past, but I've never written this particular dynamic before at this age, where I've also begun to process a particular relationship that I had. So I found that my own trauma was being triggered by the writing, because I didn't even realize like that I had gone through something until I started writing this. And it was like a way to process, but it's also bizarre because I was like, I wasn't aware that I even had these emotions. It was really weird to figure that out while I was writing, while I was doing something that I enjoyed. This is where having support is something that I wish I had had, because writing is such an isolating experience. I was doing it by myself and I wasn't talking to anybody about it. And so I think now I know what to do if this happens again, is that I would like somebody to be aware of what I'm writing because of what it means to me. And obviously I didn't know that at the time, because I didn't realize that I also had shared an experience similar to Reeve. I just didn't process it yet, or I was coming to process it. It was a good thing in that way, because I was able to actually understand something about myself and to accept something where I was like in bad denial before. It was tough because that's not what I was expecting. And I think something that makes it difficult for me to write topics like this is that I had to be deeply entrenched in the emotion in order to write it properly. And if I'm deeply entrenched in the emotion, I'm also deeply entrenched in this character's trauma. And this character's trauma is like mine. At first, when I had written a scene, I didn't do it right. I knew I had gotten it wrong. My mind was there. I knew what I had to do, but my body wasn't in it. And because it wasn't, like, I'm a body writer. If you write with your body, like, you know what I'm talking about. Like, I rely on my intuition and my senses. And because the mind was there, but the body wasn't connected, the scene was wrong. And when I did use the body to write, it ended up being better, but it was also really hard on me, right? Because you open yourself up to vulnerability there when you let in these sort of emotions or these sort of issues. It's almost like method acting in a way, where like you become the character, you become the moment. And if you're not prepared for that, you can get some surprises, which I ended up having some surprises. I think that this is a tough experience to even put into words, but I wonder if other people also relate to it, because I know a lot of people wonder, like, how do you write a character's trauma? And these are questions that I have too. I'm not gonna lie, I have this like real reservation with writing like dark things or traumatic things, because when I was younger, I was like, went real ham on it. I think it's pretty normal, like when you're a teenager and you're trying to like understand things that happen to people. I don't fault myself for doing that, but because of that, me at 21 knows that, I don't want to repeat that. I don't want to write something that isn't, accurate, or that is insensitive, or that is tough for the sake of being tough. I felt a duty this time around to do it right in comparison to what I've done in the past, where I don't think that I've done it right. And that was an added responsibility that also made me not even realize kind of where I'd taken myself in the process of writing. Because a writer, in a sense, like how I feel as a writer, is I'm a tool, kind of. Like, I try not to be at least that personal when it comes to my writing. And I love the writing itself, but I do feel like a vessel for something. And especially when writing goes well, I don't even notice that I'm doing it. It just happens. It's not like an equation where I used to be at points where I'm like precariously putting these words together to do this effect or whatever. My best writing happens when I am just sitting there and I don't know what I'm doing. Just something is moving through me. It's the intuition. Again, I really rely on that kind of stuff. Something that I found helpful when writing this difficult moment was pulling in my personal experience, but that was also invasive and at times painful. And this was like, I don't know how long it was. I honestly didn't check the word count because it has been like, just a little bit like cabin fever. So I don't really want to like revisit it that much. It was maybe the last 20,000 words of this book that I feel like I've just been locked into, right? And it's good. Like, it ended up turning out exactly how I wanted it to be. It was a struggle. It was a struggle at points, or I had to like contend with things that I didn't think that I was ever going to contend with. And I've written a lot of poetry since then about a particular relationship that I'm thinking about that informed how I wrote this section with Reeve. I felt like a kindred spirit with her in a different way. Like, we've always been very connected. I know her very well, but like, I got her in a different way here because I was like, I know exactly where you are, and I didn't want to mess it up, and I didn't want to make it too like intense just for the sake of intense. I wanted it to be represented accurately to the way that it happened to her. That was not an easy thing to do. I'm happy with it now. I'm not necessarily encouraging people to do what I did because I think I gave myself a lot to the project, and that is not always a good thing because sometimes you don't get those things back. I do think for me this was a good experience because it ended up me being able to like actually accept something that happened to me rather than being in denial about it. And so that was good, but that might not have happened. I find it interesting because I had asked that question and some people had mixed answers, like, no, it doesn't really affect them, like when characters end up in situations like what I'm describing. And some people really are affected. And I remember, now that I think about it, when I was writing with Lonan in Feeding Habits, there's this whole section with him. And that whole section of the book is pretty fucked up. Like, a lot of fucked up things happen in that section of the book. I think a lot of that summer and a lot of, the writing process was me also giving myself to this character. And it's nice in the way that you connect with somebody, they're not real, but it's somebody. But it can also be tough. I found the same thing with Harrison, because Harrison in Feeding Habits was really struggling emotionally, and sometimes it was so tough to put myself in that mindset all the time. And with Seventh Virtue, it's different because I finished the section within a month, right? Like, I'm getting out of it now. I'm not done right now. I have a little bit left to go, and then we're gonna kind of shift out of this fairy tale from hell and just be in hell, which is gonna be better actually than having the fairy tale aspect, because at least I can kind of see, okay, well, this is definitely like black and white wrong, because the whole time I'm trying to do something very purposeful and kind of not trick, but create us like a false sense of something, a false sense of comfort. And I did it so well that I started like freaking out myself. Writing is an interesting thing. Like, should you suffer for your art? I don't think so. I think writing should be something that you enjoy and that brings you joy. And if it's making you unhappy, changes might need to be made in that case. But I think what happened here for me wasn't that I was like suffering in the same way, was that I was experiencing it. And the experiencing it was what was tough and so different from when I've written difficult things in the past. This is really the first time in a long time that I've actually written something difficult. And my own experience, I think, has really helped shape this because I've been able to kind of bring that personal experience and understanding, like, again, the body understands, so can kind of write through that understanding. But it's also at risk of being like, whoa, like that was a lot. Like after I was listening to the chapters yesterday, and I was like, ooh, I like need to inhale. It was a lot. And I'm sure like for a reader, it would be a lot too. But I think for me, because I've been in it for so long, I started to just have a real difficulty with it. I was like, I told my sister, I was like, can you please like read these chapters? Like I can't stay like this anymore, like where it's just me in it. And when she read it and talked to me about it, it immediately was like, well, now it's not mine so much anymore. You know, like somebody else has read it, somebody else has shared in it. It's not like pushing it onto her, but it was more like she was able to be like, yeah, you did a good thing in your writing, and it was your writing. And I was like, oh, it's my writing, you know, it's not me. I'm happy again with how the sequence turned out. It's probably one of the best things I've written, but it was also one of the most difficult things because it was a lot of subtle work. And I think it's those subtleties that can be insidiously hurtful. But writing trauma can be tough, especially when you process your own midway. How do you guys work through that? What's important to me right now is I'm going to get out of her point of view, Reeve's point of view. I've written a sequence, I think, of 4 chapters in her head, and I haven't been in Harrison's head for a long time. I think being in his mind is just gonna like be a good thing for me. It's gonna let me clear my head a little bit. I kind of sometimes wish I did it earlier, or I was able to sort of work through like why this was so tough earlier, but I'm here now. And again, I'm happy with the writing. It was just like, wow, what an experience. And I wanted to come and talk to you guys about it because it's just fictional characters, you know, it's just things you're doing to them, right? That's what people can say, but it's not that easy or not that simple. When my sister read it yesterday and we were reading it together, I was like, wow, like I've been in this for a month. Like, holy crap, I need to write Harrison making jokes and being an idiot instead because I am, we're almost done. 7th virtue. So wish me luck. I've been making a joke. I've been writing the last 20,000 words for the last 80,000 words. So, you know, we'll see how quickly I'll finish the book, but I don't think I'm gonna have to write something like this again. So I hope not, because it might be too tough. But let's talk about it in the comments. I think what helped me a lot during this was, again, like eventually talking to somebody about it. I also worked through a flow chart yesterday, just writing out my thoughts to like really understand where I was at. And then music that mirrored the emotions. So I was like, look, it's not just me here. There's like a song here that's relevant. Somebody else has felt these emotions, you know? It's not just me stuck in this situation by myself. Just knowing that you're not alone in it. I found it tough because I didn't want to do this to her, like to Reeve. I can't. Like there are limits for me too in terms of what I can or can't make her do emotionally. I'm sorry, but because I just know her very well, I can't. It would be like hurting a friend irreparably. So I was like, this is the extent, okay? I'm sorry. That's gonna be it. So I'm gonna have to create a new character if I'm gonna get back to where I used to be at. Like in terms of ruthlessness, I am not ruthless anymore. I'm very sensitive. So, and I think that's okay. I remember when I was a kid, it was all about like, oh, like what's the worst thing, you know, you can write, like how many people can you murder in a sequence? I can't do it anymore, okay? I am very sensitive and I don't think that's a bad thing. So if you're like me too, you're not alone. But thank you guys for watching this video. Let's chat in the comments, but for now, I'll see you guys in another one. Bye.